Now, I woke up to this. Put yourself into my shoes. And you're reading what's trending. And in the headlines is Canada has a nuclear weapon in trade war. Ban PornHub in the United States. And so the first thing you're wondering is like, is this from a satirical newspaper? And you realize, no, it's not. It's from the New York Post. And it's like, oh, I see. And then you try to read the article. What is it about? And apparently, like, one comedian has made this suggestion, right? Like, some Canucks are proposing the most drastic measure yet in the trade war with Uncle Sam, blocking U.S. access to Canada-owned Pornhub. Okay, so it's like not a Canadian politician that's suggesting this. It's a comedian. But when you go on Twitter, you see that people are actually taking it seriously. Like, there are, unironically, people from Canada using this as a gotcha on their American counterparts. So, like, there's a little culture war going on. And I don't know if the Canadians realize that there are Americans that generally want this. Like, you can't threaten someone with a good time. You gotta apply it to the culture you're complaining. Now, I understand the reason for the disconnect. Like, why do Canadians not expect that Americans actually want this to happen? And this is due to the part that in the past, America was a somewhat sex-positive culture. Like, in the 90s, when I grew up, almost every single movie that was dedicated for adults, so like we're talking about slasher films, we're talking about TV shows, almost every single one of them had tits in it. There was actual calendars for sale with like Miss July, Miss October, Miss November that had sexy women on the cover. Like some of them were in bikinis, like the Victoria's Secret catalog, but other were like full nudity. And so the concept of dad's porn magazine was actually in the English lexicon. Like, the dad's porn magazine was a thing because it actually existed. Like, many people had their fathers that were married with a woman having a secret stash of stuff, right? So, like, they did existed. Now, America was also a society that always was freaking out about art, right? Like, in Europe, it's a lot different, but in the United States, they're a crusading culture. They always care about what other people think. Not how people act, right? Like, not the actions, but like what other people think. And the idea is that if you allow people to think incorrectly, even in small amounts, it destabilizes society. And so back in the 90s, the focus was on violence, right? So like while fan service existed and was promoted with real life actors in real life movies and TV shows, violence was heavily suppressed. I remember a newspaper article freaking out about the violence in Dragon Ball. Because in Dragon Ball, you have the Battle of Namek, which takes place between Frieza, Krillin, and Gohan. And Krillin is drawn like a child. He appears to be under the age of 17 based on the drawing, even though, like, canon-wise, he's an adult. And during the fighting, it's not just Gohan that gets beaten severely, but there is a scene where Krillin is killed. And he is killed in a very grotesque manner. Frieza impales him with his horn. The horn goes through his chest. Krillin pukes blood. And then Frieza starts sadistically bouncing him on the horn. And that freaked the living shit out of the boomer generation. Like, that actually led to conversations. It led to mainstream media articles. And while that didn't lead to flat-out censorship, it did lead to many parents forbidding their kids from watching anime. It did lead to many pastors and priests being extremely concerned about anime. And it didn't stop there. Like, they were concerned about violent rhetoric and lyrics from, like, black metal and death metal and heavy metal. They were concerned about lyrics from goth music, right? Like, again, they were concerned with art. They were concerned with cartoons. They were concerned with music. They were concerned with all these things that affect the way people think. But they weren't concerned about sexuality, right? Like, sexuality was fine. It's just like violence. So the question is, like, what changed? Well, you have third wave feminism happening. And third wave feminism is usually driven by the middle-aged female journalist that's single, right? So, like, you have a morbidly obese woman that's very unhappy with her life. She's got a lot of daddy issues. And it reflects in the writings of her publications. And so the third wave feminism, they think that any type of fan service is problematic. It's problematic because it promotes the male gaze, it promotes beauty standards, it reinforces the gender norms, and they even made the argument that drawings cannot consent, right? So like if you have a video game character that's sexy, even if she is of age, it's still rape because like drawings cannot consent. So like they created the moral panic with the rape culture, if you guys remember, right? And that did traumatize an entire generation that grew up under third wave feminism because it was everywhere. It was in the newspaper, it was in schools, it was affecting the minds of people around them, it was on the internet, right? So like the idea that fan service is wrong was being drilled into the heads of young people. And it's important to mention that it doesn't mean that the left isn't degenerate, because they absolutely are. But they're only degenerate with things that are not heteronormative. So like if you have fat acceptance, that's empowering. If you have a person like Lizzo that is scantily clad dressed on a stage, that's fine. But if you replace Lizzo with a woman that's like 20 years old and she's in tip-top shape and she looks gorgeous and she is dressed in the exact same clothing, that is problematic. This is why journalists, they freak out at Stellar Blade, they freak out at Nier, they freak out at Bayonetta, but they encourage and they champion stuff like the vampire from Baldur's Gate 3, or the bear sex scene from Baldur's Gate 3, or when a female character looks like a man, even if it actually does sex in the game, like The Last of Us 2, they consider that empowering. They want that promoted. They want that championed. But again, everything that has to do with heteronormativity, like stuff like Bayonetta, that needs to be suppressed. That is vile. That is harmful. So that is what the left thinks. Now you have certain people on the right that also dislike fan service, but for different reasons. Some of them dislike it because they think it's degenerate. Others dislike it because they think it's sinful, right? The Matt Walsh argument, for instance, like Matt Walsh thinks anime is satanic, so they don't like it. There are patriots on the right that do not want foreign cultures to dominate the market. So they're not comfortable that stuff that's coming from China, from Asia, from Japan, from South Korea is outselling Disney. Then there are people that are concerned with the birth rates, and they believe that young men in America are under a tsunami of pussy. Like women in America are like succubi. They just want to have a relationship, but unfortunately all the men are home playing video games or watching anime or watching porn. And because of that, they're not interested in dating. Now, it's very rare that the left and the right agree on the same social issue, but you would think that when they do, like they come to an agreement and it's a good thing. The reality is that they will usually take the most harmful, extreme things from both sides, right? So like the authoritarianism is going to be taken both from the far left and from the radicals on the right, and they unite forces. And this is pretty much what's happening. This is like the war on fan service as we see it right now, with watering down of definitions, with left and right-wing cancel culture. Like you would see an artist post a doodle on Twitter, and the people that would freak out about it, right? Like he draws a woman with big fat tits from Nikkei, and the people that freak out about it, they're either furries, they either have pronouns in the bio, they may have an LGBT flag, or they may have crosses in the bio. You know, they may have like an entire Twitter account dedicating just to sports, grilling, and fishing, right? Like these are the people that freak out because you have the weird alliance on this particular topic. And it did happen in the past. There were activist groups in the past that did a lot of grifting with this. There were a lot of money to be made by being on a board that gets to decide what is and isn't allowed on TV. It was an alliance between feminists and religious people. The feminists were concerned about the way women are portrayed in media, right? Like, for instance, your Cartoon Network. And you get to greenlight some cartoons and some not. And they look at how the women are depicted, how the women are treated, and then the religious people have a say, and then they decide if the cartoon is allowed for viewing. Like, that did happen in the past. But the thing is, right now, there is, yes, like I would state it is the beginning of a moral panic on everything that has to do with fan service, and it's starting with how every moral panic starts, by watering down definitions. So you already have the Gunnar-gate thing, where you have like someone like Melody Mac say that a gacha game from Asia, because you get to see a plump ass in it, she says that it's porn, right? And people that are with her, they're saying, well, porn needs to be banned, right? And the Gunnars are the problem. And so the statement is basically the first Descendant video game, which again is a video game rated T for teens, like it's not even a mature or an adult-only game or anything like that. No, it's just like a teen game that you can download on the App Store. Like it already passed the censorship from the App Store. But they're saying that the game is degenerate because it has porn in it and the Gunnars are the problem. And so this is just repackaged talking points from 5 years ago that would say the game is problematic because it has scantily clad depictions in it that cater to the male gaze and misogynists support it, or incels support it. It's literally the same argument, right? It's part of the culture. Why is it part of the culture? Well, for several reasons. Number one, it's very easy to score cheap virtue points by going after porn. Like everyone gives you a standing ovation. You went after porn. Congratulations, right? No one is going to defend it. You're not going to get any other talking points. People that try to defend it, they get social stigma. So all you gotta do is you pick on a video game, you attack it, and you get a standing ovation. You pick on an artist that draws nudes on Twitter, you get a standing ovation. Right? Now all of a sudden you're a virtuous person. You don't have to donate to charity, you don't have to go to a soup kitchen, you don't have to do anything. Just sit on Twitter and do the Slacktivism. It's the same type of Slacktivism that worked before, like the culture didn't change. The tools are there, now it's just a different target. But it's the same concept, right? And it makes people feel good, like they're cleaning up the dredges of society, right? Like you're improving society one video game at a time. But the other problem is the politicians. The politicians love this shit. Because it's a standing American tradition. Whenever you want to pass an authoritarian law, all you gotta do is to say it saves the children, or it's to fight terrorism. Like, that's how Uncle Sam likes to package his shit. And so, you have like things that are in Texas, for instance, the PornHub law, which forces people to show ID when they're browsing the internet. Which normalizes the concept of showing ID, something that politicians have wanted to do for more than 10 years now, but had no idea how to implement it. If you look at what's happening, like the law was passed, and what do people do? They install VPNs to bypass the law, or they go to a different website. Like that, it doesn't actually do anything, you know? Like if you actually look at what the law effect is over time, it hasn't fixed anything, but it has passed because it's think of the children, right? And the idea of like going online and showing ID to destroy internet anonymity is something that China is doing. Everyone loves China, right? Like all the governments of the world, they say they don't dislike China, but they want to be like China. And so if you are to assume that, okay, well, if the website has porn, now you need to show ID. Well, that means you need to show ID to go on Twitter, you need to show ID to go on Discord. Maybe you even need to show ID in order to go on Google, because you can use the Google search in order to find naughty images, right? And so you can see where this mindset is leading, where this train of thought is inevitably going, and there is no roadblock. And of course, like they will say, oh, it's the slippery slope fallacy. The same arguments, exactly, copied, word for word, like when the feminism stuff happened and people were saying, you're trying to censor the internet with your trust and safety councils. And everyone was like, no, that slippery slope, never gonna happen. It did happen, right? And the interesting thing is, like, again, they found a common denominator between the left and the right, which is the heteronormative pornography, which the left and the right agrees that it should be banned. And so now all you have to do is like, okay, we agree that porn should be banned. Let's water down the definition of what porn is so we can include more things that should be banned. So, okay, you know, it used to be like porn is hardcore penetration. That's what people agree. What about nudity? Well, nudity is porn as well, right? But what about like a fully clothed woman that's in a titillating pose? Well, that's porn too now. Like everything is watered down in its definitions in order to start, as I mentioned before, getting cheap virtue signaling on Twitter by going after artists, by going after companies that are promoting this stuff. And then it's for politicians to say, well, it's okay. Society's bad. You saw how bad it is. We'll keep you safe. We'll keep you safe. Just show your ID when you go to a website. And I saw right-wingers defended by saying, well, yeah, but like when you go to a bar, don't you need to show ID? And it's true, when you go to a bar, you do show ID, but like the bar doesn't store your ID in a file, right? Like they don't associate what you communicate, what you talked when you were sitting at the table in the bar, who you visited, who you saw, the fact that you even entered the bar, at what hour, at what time, right? Like they don't store that information. But if someone was to go to a website like PornHub and they show their ID, then all their traffic is linked. That is like the best blackmail material that anyone can ever ask for, right? And of course, I'm not suggesting that the website like PornHub, for instance, would want to leak the private information of their customers. But what if it gets hacked? And now you have like an entire list, probably of very influential, very rich people that can be blackmailed. Like I guarantee to you, like if you want to see degeneracy, look at the rich, look at the wealthy. Like you're going to have senators, judges, prosecutors, they all watch porn, like it's a billion-dollar industry because people watch it. They don't want to admit it in public, but they do, right? So like imagine if you had like a list of the stuff that, and the searches that senators and influential people, I mean, that is the best blackmail material ever. This is why Pornhub doesn't want to do it, because they don't want the responsibility. Like it would crush the company if it ever happens that they get hacked and all that information is leaked to the public. Holy shit. But that doesn't stop, politicians in taking advantage of this moral crisis. It doesn't stop grifters making money off of this moral crisis. And as all moral crisis, it's probably going to last for a couple more years, like 2 or 3, before people move on to the next thing. And if my assessment is correct, usually a moral crisis actually ends up worse for the thing that it claims to defend. And so we may actually notice, in the future, a lot more degeneracy, like when people finally do the pushback, and you get to see like some random artists, especially that are very popular and have a lot of support, getting in trouble. Like people will start getting outraged over it, there will be a pushback, and eventually you're going to see even more degeneracy than ever. This is how the world works, by the way. It's a historical pattern. It's not something that can be stopped, prevented, it's just an observation. So the thing with Pornhub in Canada, hilarious. Don't even fucking try it, okay? Like the Americans right now on Twitter, they would want you to ban the website. They don't understand the consequences, of course, because Pornhub is extremely sanitized, right? Like it's a place that normies can get their rocks off and it's good. Where there are other websites that aren't sanitized, like far more dangerous places. And trust me, when there is a demand on the market, if you're not actually persuading the people that, hey, this is bad for you, you shouldn't do it, and instead all you're trying to do is to take away their outlet, they're going to find other outlets. Like, porn existed before Pornhub. I'm pretty sure people will figure out other ways. It's just that it's not going to be the same sanitized, controlled version that a professional website puts on display. It is what it is, maybe people will get their wish, and then they will see the consequences. Like during the alcoholic prohibition, for instance, right? Like they banned alcohol, and what did they accomplish? Well, eventually the alcohol came back, but you also managed to create an empire of crime, many deaths over it, people being arrested over drinking alcohol, right? Like someone's father was caught drinking alcohol and now he's in prison. It enrages his family, by the way. They don't blame the father, because the family may not agree with the prohibition. So it will enrage the family against the politician. Imagine someone's son going to prison because he was at a party and he drank wine. Like the people are, especially the father, they're going to hate the government and the activists, especially. Because that's human nature. That's how it works. It doesn't mean it makes sense. It doesn't mean it's logical. But humans are irrational. And humans care about their family more than anything else. So like when you start arresting family members over trivial shit, like alcohol, smoking pot, another example, right? Like the black community still hates the government because they arrest people that smoke pot. Well, when you do that, you're going to have different social consequences. There is no right and wrong in politics. It's just trade-offs. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the comment section. Take care.